Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. We're your hosts, Alex and Cass, and we're here to take you through all the way to 7 p.m. with some great, hard-hitting stories.
It's been great being here tonight, Alex. How you been? How's your weekend?
Oh, insane. I went to Monado Zoo yesterday. It was so good.
I love the zoo. I wish I could go a little bit more. I'm a fiend of the zoo, to be honest.
Have you been to Monado recently?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I hadn't been in years, but they've done a whole revamp. So now they've got like a visitor centre in the middle, and it's just all like fancy and stuff. And there's a resort opening there next year. So
I'll have to take a little trip down.
Stay tuned.
It will be great.
Yeah.
Well,
what have you been doing for the weekend?
I got a tattoo, which was nice.
Highlights.
It's been awesome. And then I just worked. Pretty boring. I feel like I always come here with the most boring stuff, but...
Yeah, pick up your game.
I will.
You need
Alex.
a party weekend in 2 weeks, and I expect good stories.
I will. I'll do it just for you, babes. Don't worry. Well, yet again, it's been a massive week, and we have a super interesting show for you tonight. We talk about online communication after COVID.
And later on, we have Amber talking you through quiet quitting on Wavelength Explains, and Grace cheers you up on Heaps Good News.
But before we get into any of that, Maggie speaks with Ali Valentine about her personal experiences with long COVID.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
I sat down with Ali Valentine, who has been experiencing the effects of long COVID throughout this year. Thank you so much for your time, Ali. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm a mum of two. I work practically full-time. I was very active. Would go to the gym 3-4 times a week, running around with the kids, doing all the normal stuff. But had COVID back in February and now have been diagnosed with long COVID.
Can you briefly explain what long COVID is?
So it's actually a chronic disease. I've been referred now to the Max clinic at the RA, which is a chronic disease clinic. It's like a post-viral fatigue, but it presents differently in each person. So mine is all about my breath. I get very tired, but also I struggle to breathe. I had no asthma. I had all my vaxes. People would ask, so you had asthma? Oh, but do you smoke? None of those things. But my presentation is all in my breathing. I can't lift things. I can't walk very fast or very far. If I dry my hair, I have to sit down. People can have heart complications or other iterations. It's just completely individual. I have a friend who's the same age as me, similar active level and similar kind of job, and she has long COVID too. That's the only people I know of.
Has the clinic at the Royal Adelaide Hospital given you a prognosis on how long those symptoms might last?
Yeah, they don't know. I mean, they'd love to, but really it's about symptom management rather than curing because there's nothing they can really do. But initially they were like, this could be a couple of months, but now I'm 6 months in, it's likely to be a year. But again, everyone's going to be different.
What steps have you had to take to manage your symptoms?
So I'm in a rehab program at the RA. So it's doing gradual exercise with a PT to help because of the deconditioning after having an illness. So make sure you're liaising closely with your own GP. For example, my GP will send me for blood tests every now and again. They tried B12 injections to help with energy levels. They're testing some medications to see if they make any difference. They're doing all the due diligence of making sure it's nothing else sinister creating these symptoms, but really they don't know yet. Last time I was in the RA, they've printed out some information from the NHS, who are a couple of years ahead of understanding what patients are going through, and also something from World Health Organization. It's really like, take it easy, plan in advance, use your energy sensibly, especially as a working mum. You go, okay, I've got this amount of work I need to do, there's these things for the kid, and there's this after school activity. So it's pre-planning, getting people to help, and just acknowledging that you can't do everything that you once did. I'm so lucky to have a really flexible and understanding workplace because there are days like I'm going to need to go home a little bit early because my battery is now flat. I can't go out at night. I'm struggling at work. I feel like I'm not pulling my weight at home with the kid, but you almost have to settle into it and think there's so many things that are worse than this. So it's being kind to yourself and saying, I recognise that this is a chronic disease, and if I'm kind to myself and do all the right things, I'll get better quicker.
Do you have any advice or resources for people who may have recently been diagnosed with long COVID?
My doctor was a little bit on the front foot when I was first diagnosed. She found out about the Max clinic. My friend, when she was diagnosed, her doctor didn't know. And it's so fantastically resourced with some really, really compassionate, gorgeous staff looking after you. And there's a whole team of specialists referring you onto the things that are relevant for you. So I think it's being aware that that resource is there and getting your doctor to give you a referral. I'm so fortunate to have a friend going through the same thing, to know that you're not alone in it. If you do feel a little bit, why did this happen to me? So reaching out to people going through similar experiences experiences and understanding that you're not alone is helpful.
If you had one main takeaway from this experience that you would like to share with people, what would that be?
The thing that's concerned me is when people have taken it so lightly. I was careful about COVID anyway because you think this is an unknown, but it's about everyone taking responsibility. You might be fine if you have COVID, but someone else might be affected in this long-term chronic way.
If you or someone you know is suffering from long COVID, speak to your GP about getting a referral to the Chronic Disease Multidisciplinary Ambulatory Consulting Service, or MAX Clinic, at the Royal Adelaide Hospital.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks so much for that, Maggie. And thank you to Alison as well for giving us a first-hand account of what it's like for something that's really serious and not talked about enough.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it that much, and I didn't realise how scary and debilitating it is for people. It's really serious.
I think we kind of kid ourselves that it's for people that are vulnerable, people that are in very immunocompromised situations, but I think this is proof that COVID is something we should still take seriously, and it can affect any of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really scary what she said, that there's a lot of doctors who don't even know information about it. Like, it just needs to be spoken about more, hopefully more education about it. It's hard when it's so new.
Well, hopefully, as she said, the UK is about 2 years ahead, so hopefully between our research, theirs, and all around the world, that, progress is made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't go anywhere. Up next, Kate talks with Shane Dawson about how universities have changed after COVID. You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking convos about Adelaide you should be having.
It's not a surprise that life has changed dramatically after COVID, and learning to live with those changes has been an adjustment for sure.
Now, one of those changes has been education, and back in 2020, universities switched to relying on online lectures and tutorials to function. 2 years on, universities have continued to adapt to a combination of both online and offline. To find out some of the strengths and weaknesses of this new hybrid system, Kate spoke with Shane Dawson, a co-director from UniSA, who focuses on education futures.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Shane Dawson from UniSA uses analytics to find out how students work best. Now, online learning has been in the works long before COVID. Why is this?
The reason why universities started to invest in the use of educational technologies to provide greater flexibility for students. Before COVID days, we were actually complaining about students not attending lectures. And was it better for me to attend a workplace and actually earn some money so I can pay for education? So students would sacrifice elements of their education to, have part-time employment as well. That's not a great process.
Do you think that outweighs students maybe not exactly engaging with the online workplace?
So it doesn't matter so much whether it's online or whether it's face-to-face. It's how is it best designed. So there are some fantastic instances of, face-to-face on-campus sessions. Similarly, there's absolutely terrible versions. And you can say the same with the online. There are cases where it's just not a well-thought-out course, and there are cases where these have been really, really well designed. One of the areas for UniSA in sort of moving forward in their digital technologies was to look at what is the optimal design processes that we need to do that best engage students for the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. If we're looking at something where it's sort of like a rote learning experience, if you had to recall first year anatomy and you had to naming various muscles, anatomical features, then the best way to do that is test. And so the online environment is really a good space for that because you've got lots of quizzes, lots of pictures, lots of multimedia that you can bring into that.
Yes, there is much flexibility and benefits of going online, but if the teacher or tutor or lecturer is spending that time making this online thing, why can't it just be in real life as well for those students that do learn better that way?
We're doubling up on everything then, aren't we? And so there are elements where you're trying to provide content knowledge, and then you'll have tutorial sessions where it is that valuable face-to-face time. The ability to listen to a recording or review and constantly review a concept, there's an artifact there that you can continually draw on over time. When I went to university, if I missed a lecture, I was running around trying to get notes from my friends who may have attended the lecture. They're not going to give you the content again.
You mentioned doubling up, but correct me if I'm wrong. If they do record a lecture, isn't it just recording it with a button? Is there really an issue with doubling up?
Better to utilise the spaces that as humans we are best at, which is that engagement feedback element, and use the technologies for the areas that's also good at in terms of the transmission of content in certain spaces.
I guess something that the South Australian youth are sort of concerned with, are there less people sort of attending the social things that come along with university, have you found?
There was some good work from a group of Finnish researchers looking at sense of community and student satisfaction during the COVID situation. And what they found that early on the student satisfaction, sense of belonging was very low. Then that's also elements of stress, uncertainty. Flip side is that rapidly improved as the course design improved. And that was basically their findings, that stress reduced, study on time increased, and sense of belonging increased, associated with improved course design in the online environment. Obviously, we're social beings. We want to get together, but it's what are we getting together for? It doesn't mean anything to bring students onto campus unless there's a logical reason to bring them onto campus, which is why lecture attendance was so low, right? Because I could get that information, I could get those avenues elsewhere.
Do you think there's going to be a decrease in the social things?
Because of the COVID situation, that they've likely gone down. Adelaide, the government there's had a big push to try and bring vibrancy back to the Adelaide city. I think that has more of an impact than, say, the footy club at UniSA for student community and interaction. So if the city centre is vibrant, there's a reason to come into the city. There's a reason to be more attached into those areas, be to go with your friends and have those other social engagements that are really necessary.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that. That was Kate speaking with Shane Dawson, a co-director from UniSA who focuses on educational futures. It's interesting to see some of the run-on effects COVID has had 2 years on in tertiary education. You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Before the break, you heard Kate speak with Shane Dawson about online uni.
Education isn't the only industry that has relied on online communication, though. We now have Kate talking to Kathryn McEwen, a psychologist, about online working.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Kathryn McEwen, as a psychologist, you'd know best that humans are social creatures. So with this shift to an online workplace, do you think that humans can still gain that connectedness via Zoom?
People will show up as they want to show up for that hour of the Zoom or whatever it might be. And I think that sense of connection is simply not there like it is in face-to-face.
People can totally wear like pajama pants on the bottom half.
Yes.
So,
as we all have.
Yes, and a lot of the time there's sort of a pressure to not put your camera on if no one else has their camera on. How do you think that impacts productivity when it comes to being able to hide behind a computer screen?
I do a lot of webinars, and I know as soon as people have their cameras off, then there's a certain amount of disengagement. You wonder to what extent people are fully authentically there versus actually, doing their shopping list.
This whole thing was dubbed as a bit of a social isolation. Working as a psychologist, Kathryn, do you feel like a lot of people are coming in feeling that sort of pressure of loneliness and isolation?
We definitely do need some face-to-face connection, and it's been really interesting just in the past couple of weeks. I've noticed a trend of people, younger people in particular, wanting a little bit more coaching on confident communication. You wonder whether or not that capacity for social communication is actually being hampered by this very structured, we've got a 1 hour in which we actually engage with our tutor group or with our work colleagues, whether or not that our capacity to make that small talk, know when to interrupt, all of those sorts of things that are social cohesion.
Introverts are saying they're loving this, but can humans at all get away with not being social when it comes to, being fulfilled in life?
When we are actually remotely working, we miss out on the office romances, the building friends and relationships, social chit-chat. But importantly, in terms of our career, we miss out on all those cues that help us learn what we need to learn. The overhearing someone on the phone, the watching what people do to get along, the seeing how people interact with the boss. That's such a crucial part of what enables us to be the best student, the best worker.
Definitely, yep. The greatest love stories of all time. Prob's not made over Zoom. So what would be your tip for someone that wants to connect with their colleagues or classmates? Perhaps gain deeper, more meaningful relationships. Is that quite possible when you're just working in an online space and not actually seeing them physically face to face?
Well, you can never ever tell until you actually get that chemistry in the moment. And I'm thinking as a Married at First Sight, where they supposedly do all this testing and look at your values and your personality, but how many of them, when they actually meet and they eyeball each other, are immediately saying no, so there's no way that we could actually have meaningful relationship on Zoom, or let alone the intimacy piece of that, which I don't want to go there. There's all sorts of possibilities around that. But yeah, it's and it's the same for friendship. We all have people that you want to be in their company and you want to be in their presence. I've found that I've had lots of people who have not actually yet met the people they work with, and you start to get a whole range of preconceptions because you see them in one two-dimensional space. But I've heard of lots of people who have tried to find out about their colleagues through social media to try to get to know this person. I'd be encouraging people to still meet, to still meet for a coffee, to still, in Adelaide, we're in a position where we're certainly not confined home just because I really feel quite sad that uni life is pretty much now confined to just doing your assignments and getting your grades and missing out on that holistic part of the whole journey and enjoyment and partying and all those things that it used to be. Quite sad, really.
We can make our own reality, right? We don't need to stick to that. We can go out, get rid of those preconceptions and, meet people face to face.
Yeah, just because we're doing our lectures online doesn't mean that we need to then retreat and make life, all about, being alone. We have to get out of a comfort zone, and just because we can do it doesn't mean that we should do it, because it's not healthy, really.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Kate and Kathryn.
Up next, we have Amber explaining what quiet quitting is. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Wavelength here on Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Fresh. You're listening to Wavelength. You may have seen on TikTok or online the idea of quiet quitting, but what is it really? Luckily, we have Amber taking you through it.
Wavelength explains on Fresh 92.7.
Zed Khan, a 24-year-old software engineer and musician, posted a viral TikTok explaining the trend quiet quitting. Unlike what the title suggests, quiet quitting does not involve quitting from your workplace, but as Khan states, you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. Hustle culture has dominated mainstream media for the last couple years, so I'm sure many millennials and Gen Zs are relieved to hear that burning yourself out has itself been burnt out. So what is quiet quitting? Quiet quitting is about closing off your laptop at 5 p.m. and switching off your work notifications after work hours. In a time where many have or still are working from home, more and more people are understanding the difficulty to differentiate work life with their home life. Most importantly, many people are realizing that with better mental health comes a better work ethic, and that quiet quitting isn't about lowering your work performance, but realizing your limitations. During COVID-19 lockdowns, many confessed to struggling mental health as the line between work life and home life blurred together. For parents, it meant their office also became a schoolyard. So I think many people loved the idea of quiet quitting, as we have begun to realize that those few hours of personal time are so essential to our health and well-being. Whether quiet quitting to you means clocking off at 5 p.m. or simply switching off your phone while you're at the pub, whether you quietly quit overextending yourself at the office to protect your mental health, or whether you are comfortable enough to talk to your boss about having an honest conversation about work expectations. I believe these are the first steps to quietly quit the suffocating hustle lifestyle.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Really interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Amber.
I think it's really interesting because when our co-worker Demi pitched this story, it kind of was, I just heard about it on TikTok from a couple videos, and now it's become really, really big and really important topic, I think, to talk about. Like that hustle culture of getting home at 11 p.m. Is that still relevant? Is it still necessary? Is it still healthy?
Yeah, not to sound like, but we've been talking about this for, the last couple of weeks, and not to sound like intensely anti-capitalist, down with the system kind of stuff.
If you want.
We can go there. But it is, it makes no sense, because you said employers are coming out and they're annoyed that this movement's happening. Yeah. They're annoyed that people are putting in less effort. But they're putting in less effort, but they're putting in the effort they're paid for.
Absolutely. It's not saying they're not doing their job. They are doing their job. They're just disassociating from that idea of working 150% of the time and responding to emails at 10 p.m. and all of those kinds of things. I think those work boundaries are really, really important for your mental well-being and your physical well-being, and just also companies should be aware and respect it.
Exactly. I agreed to sell my labour. I didn't agree to sell my soul.
The world can be a scary place, from secret political power grabs to a new COVID variant every week. It's hard to remain positive, but we have done all the hard work to give you all the good news stories that have happened this week. Before that, let's get right back into the jams. You listen to Wavelength here on Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Right now we have Grace taking you through the good news stories of the week.
I know there's gonna be
Heaps Good news on Wavelength.
Take a deep breath in and get ready for some heaps good news. Wipe the dust off your passport and get ready to escape this winter, because you can now fly direct to Fiji from Adelaide, meaning those hours you would have wasted during a layover in a boring airport, you can waste in a luxurious resort or on a beach instead. And in an effort to end period poverty, Scotland has become the first country in the world to make period products free. The products will be offered through councils and education providers to those that require them. This comes as a part of the Period Products Act, which was originally introduced by Labour member of Scottish Parliament, Monica Lennon, who has been campaigning for the change since 2016. A huge win for Scotland, and hopefully the rest of the world will follow soon. Last week, South Australia became the first state to appoint an Assistant Minister for Autism. Emily Burke will oversee a new autism strategy within the state's disability plan, as well as set up the Autism Education Advisory Group. How good's that? Now's the time to head to Monado, because the safari park is celebrating a baby boom of critically endangered species. This includes 5 addax calves, 5 eland calves, and a Przewalski horse foal, the first since 2017. Don't ask me how many times I practiced pronouncing those names. And for the first time ever, researchers have spawned out-of-season coral in Australia. Through artificial moonlight and controlled conditions, the breakthrough was achieved 6 months ahead of the Great Barrier Reef's conditions. Researchers hope this will strengthen future restoration efforts. And breathe out. Feeling heaps good now?
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Grace, you are the heaps good news. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon.
Thanks again for tuning in this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Don't go anywhere though. Up next, you've got Deep with ECG. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.